Yeah, my mom said it, but we are in the my two mom Sunday dinner's house. My grandma's we are unmuted, so whenever you're ready. Oh, yeah. Family here. Thank you.
North Country Ministry.
You have a tradition, something that you work after you
You're gonna keep that? Nope. Okay. Two.
I just wondered if you have
I think we both have conflicts for today, so I think we're good. What's up? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I believe we have everyone here today who's available. Welcome and thank you. This is going to be our first stakeholders meeting for Warren County for our plan to reform and reinvent policing. I thank you all for joining us today and agreeing to participate. You know, you all have very busy schedules. We have a number of us together. I know all of you, but I'm sure there are some in the room who don't know one another. And I think we have a lot of people around our county who are watching this via Zoom. So if you would, I'm going to ask you to please go around the room, and then I'll ask on Zoom for everyone just a brief introduction, who you are, your title, and who you're with.
Ryan Moore, Warren County Administrator.
Terry Como, I'm the Sheriff of the Warren County Sheriff. Robert Smith, Lieutenant for the District Boss.
Peter DiFiore, Lieutenant for the Sheriff's Office.
Frank Evans, the Sheriff of the Warren County Board of Supervisors.
James Baxter, District Superintendent of Washington, Saratoga, Warren, Hamilton, Essex, Poston.
Bob Ducey, Director of Warren County.
I'm Rebecca Banner. I'm a social worker for Narcotics Ministry. Marcy Flores, Warren County Public Defender.
Michael Biddle, Adirondack Regional Chamber of Commerce.
Liza Oxendorf, Warren County Director of Employment Training.
Fred Wyatt, Supervisor, Town Pastor, Chairman of the Public Safety Committee.
And Timothy Lorenzo, Assistant to the County Administrator.
I'm going to go across the screen and just ask everyone one at a time. Ms. Gooden.
Sorry, on mute. Mary Gooden, President of the Glens Falls branch of the NAACP.
You, Mr. Monahan.
Hi, Todd Monahan, KSAC Certified Alcohol Substance Abuse Counselor, work for Conifer Park.
Thank you, Mr. Bear.
Brian Bear, CEO of the YMCA.
Thank you, Mr. York.
Yes, Robert York, Director of Community Services for Warren and Washington counties. I serve as the county mental health director for the 2 counties.
Thank you. Mr. Lloyd?
Major Leo Lloyd, Salvation Army Commanding Officer, Tri-County Area.
Thank you. Ms. Gardner?
Rachel Gartner, Domestic Violence Project of Warren, Washington Counties, of Catholic Charities of Saratoga, Warren, Washington Counties.
Thank you. District Attorney Carsone?
Yeah, Jason Carasone with the Warren County DA's office. I'm actually downstairs, so but I may get pulled away, so that's why I'm down here.
Okay, thank you. And I'm Jim LaFar. I'm the sheriff here in Warren County. Our group is comprised of 21 stakeholders from multiple disciplines throughout our county. But our position here in the sheriff's office is we really have a little over 64,000 stakeholders. We're hopeful that a number of residents throughout our community are going to be viewing today, providing some feedback, not just today, but throughout this process. In June, our governor issued Executive Order 203, and that order was really born out of a series of tragedies in law enforcement. And through that order, he established a requirement that the head of our government, for us it's Chairman Thomas, convene this group in order to formulate a plan. And throughout this process, the initial phase was for us to do a comprehensive review of our organization and operations. And there's much that's said through this process relating to compliance. It's true that we have to have a plan in place that's adopted, reviewed by the public, approved, in place by April 1st to be compliant. But for us, we're more concerned about commitment. We're really committed to this process. We see this as an opportunity for the county, for people outside of our organization to take a look at what we're doing and offer suggestions and ways that we can improve. Before we can really do that, I think it's important for everyone to have an understanding of our sheriff's office, what we do, what's expected of us, to know that through this executive order, every municipality that has a police department has to go through this process, has to develop their own plan, and there really is no cookie cutter plan. In a sheriff's office, we have a correctional facility, we have an emergency communication center, we have a civil office, and we also have our road patrol, the police officers and investigators who you see out in the cars that protect each and one of us every day. The plan that we're going to be speaking of and collaboratively putting together relates to the police reform. So during these discussions and when we receive comments, please, I'm not going to suggest that someone doesn't submit a comment to us or a suggestion, but the plan relates to police work and it relates to police reform. I know that we do a lot to collaborate with outside organizations already. We want to continue to do that. Our sheriff's office has been working hard since January 1st to really make connections and form relationships throughout the county. But this plan really focuses on what we as law enforcement can do to improve our operations and to provide the best service possible. We have an established operations manual, things that guide us day to day in our operations. The manual is something that evolves, as does law enforcement and service, but the principles that guide us have been established since the 1800s, and they're principles that essentially, if we're committed to our community and providing the best service possible, everything else is going to fall into place. What I'd like to do is start getting into this executive order, go through point by point. There are a number of terms and points that are required of us to address, and some of you may not have an understanding of what those terms actually mean. So through this meeting, I would ask everyone in-house and everyone on Zoom, please consider this a very informal meeting. Don't wait to be asked to speak. If you have something you'd like to say, please shout it out. I'd like to talk about something and make sure nothing gets missed. The governor's executive order spells out a number of points, and I provided in your packets and I emailed to everyone a copy of this executive order. If you look on the second page, there are portions that are highlighted. Those highlighted portions are really what he, as our governor, expects us to take a look at and really focus on as it relates to policing. Again, I want to say to everyone in this group and everyone in our community, we're not going to stop with just these points. If there are points in other areas we can improve, we want to hear about them, and we're going to incorporate them in this plan. The timeline that's been established for an organization of our size to be asked to take a comprehensive look at ourselves, to meet with stakeholders on multiple occasions, to receive feedback from our community, do it legitimately, to develop a draft plan, provide that back to the public again, and come up with a final plan and do so by April 1st, really is an unrealistic timeline. It's not fair to us, it's not fair to you, and more importantly, it's not fair to our community. So what I will say to you is we're not going to feel the pressure. We're not going to rush this process. We're going to establish our best plan, put something in place by April 1st, but the process will continue. We're going to continue to work and look forward and always be working to improve. So we are left with a limited period of time. We're coming into the holidays. For us in Warren County, we really have to have a plan that's drafted and something we can present to our full Board of Supervisors by the third Friday in March. And that's coming very quickly. I just bring that up to let you know that we are on a timeline, but please do not feel any pressure. We're going to get this done, and we're going to do it very well. So touching on these concerns point by point, the first is something known as evidence-based policing. And essentially, it is exactly as it sounds. It's establishing best practices through data, through research, through statistics, and coming up, much like in medicine, with the most effective practice, strategy, or technique that's best for the public and causes the least amount of harm. A number of points that we're going to follow up on: procedural justice, racial bias, implicit bias awareness, de-escalation. These are all evidence-based policing practices. They're things that we're doing in the Warren County Sheriff's Office currently. For us, this is an area that we know that we want to continue to improve upon. We want to seek more training for our officers, continuing education. You can never learn enough. And this is something that we want to get as much feedback from the public, especially members of education who are more in tune with studies. And if we can collaborate some way, we're going to do that. There's an organization, the American Society of Evidence-Based Policing. We've taken a look at that. We hope to become members of that organization. We also gather studies and statistics from the New York State Sheriff's Association, the New York State Chiefs of Police, NYSEC, the New York State Intelligence Center. So we have tremendous and deep resources that are accessible to us, and we utilize those resources on a regular basis. Any questions about evidence-based policing? Okay. Use of force policies. We'll get into this in much more depth as we get later down in the presentation for our meeting here today. But I included in your packet our current use of physical force policy for the Warren County Sheriff's Office. And what I will say to you is, as part of our comprehensive review, our policy is consistent with the New York State Municipal Police Training Council's policy. And it has to be for us to be an accredited agency with the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. Their policies adapt, adjust, evolve, and as they do, we change. So when this order was first released in June, we recognized that we were a little bit out of compliance with our policy. We tweaked it then. I took a look recently prior to this meeting, and on 11/16, I just amended our policy again to make sure that every point of their policy is contained within our policy. So you'll notice that we're constantly taking a look at what we're doing and looking to improve. Procedural justice. This is really the bread and butter of law enforcement, customer service. Procedural justice, in a nutshell, is the point that people are less concerned with the outcome and more concerned with the process. They want to be heard. They want to have you explain things to them so they can understand. They want to make sure that we're neutral. Justice is blind. And they want to make sure that we treat them with respect. Procedural justice is something that the Warren County Sheriff's Office lives by. If you have an agency that is guided by quotas, that's driven by performance through numbers, you're setting an agency up, you're setting your community up for failure. Our administration has delivered a strong message to all of our members that we're not concerned with the number of arrests you make. We're not concerned with how many tickets you write. We want you to care and be committed to your community. And if you do so, everything else will fall in place. We guide our operations every day through procedural justice.
Sheriff, going back just a little bit, can you explain what an accredited agency is? Not everybody's accredited, not all police agencies are accredited in the state.
Certainly. The New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services, this is, it's coming down in point 16 on the requirements, but I'm going to touch on it because the two kind of blend. They have a program for law enforcement agencies, police agencies to apply for and be inspected or audited and receive accreditation under 110 standards that cover certain things: the administration, your operations, handling of evidence, training, use of physical force, reports, paperwork. It's extremely comprehensive. It's really challenging, for one, to apply, and two, to remain compliant. The Warren County Sheriff's Office has been successfully reaccredited. We were just reaccredited in September in corrections, civil, communications, and law enforcement services since 1990. I've served as the program manager for the past 11 years, and I'm also an auditor and assessor with the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. This is something that I buy into wholeheartedly. If an agency is accredited, the program establishes a framework for professional law enforcement services, and essentially it holds our feet to the fire to make sure that we're not cutting corners, we're doing what's expected of us. And every 5 years, there's a team of assessors that come in and take a look to make sure that we are in fact doing what we're saying we're doing. Throughout the state, there are only 160 law enforcement agencies that are accredited. That's roughly 29%. And of the 58 sheriff's offices, only 32 are accredited. It's something that I'm very proud of. While we're still on the topic, if you take a look towards the back of your packet, it's the second from the last, there's a document that's New York State Law Enforcement Accreditation Program, 43.8, just to offer a little insight as to how things evolve for us in law enforcement. Clearly, the care of a person who's in custody of a police agency is something that's very important and something that absolutely cannot be neglected. The law enforcement program has a council, and the council is made up of members from multiple disciplines, much like this here. They're constantly reviewing the program, the standards. When they see a need or a void, something that needs to be addressed or reformed, they will either revise a current standard or they will implement new standards. 43.8, as you read it, is a new standard. It's something that an agency, to remain accredited, must develop a policy that complies with this standard, and they must have it in place by January 1st. I'd like to let you know that this is something that was incorporated into our use of physical force policy, and we've already submitted our policy to New York State. So we are already in compliance, well ahead of the game. But these are the types of things that, issues that are on our radar, issues that we're going to talk about in great length as stakeholders in our community, are issues that they face and review and address each and every day. And I really appreciate that question, Mr. Houston. Any questions on procedural justice? Okay.
So now, is there, for your accreditation, is 21 hours a year per person?
21 hours a year per person of in-service training. So that's not initial training through the academy. And I have to be honest with you, that's not enough. That's the minimum requirement. Right. And if we've seen anything in our sheriff's office, we recognize that we have tremendous training needs. We've already met with our supervisors and let them know that we're going to look to be doing more with training. Training is expensive. We're going to do our best to make sure that we find as much training, any free training we can find and send somebody to, we're going to, but a well-informed, highly trained organization is a strong organization. And again, they're going to take better care of our community. But just to say, in the sheriff's office, our officers receive far more than 21 hours per year in service training. Okay. Studies addressing systemic racial bias. This is something that the governor is asking us to do, to review studies to see how they would apply to our county. It's a portion of evidence-based policing. Again, this implicit bias awareness training and de-escalation training are 3 points that we are going to work to find as much training as possible. If we can find it remotely or virtually, that's going to be our best resource currently. You know, it's really tough for us to go out into the field and meet with a group and do anything in a classroom. So that's something we are going to actively seek out and make sure that we put our officers in front of an instructor to receive this training. Systemic racial bias. You know, I'm going to open this up to the group. This is an area that's outside my expertise. And, you know, it's something that I'm confident that we're not experiencing. But again, I'll take that back. I'll say that I've not been informed or been made aware of any issues or concerns relating to systemic racial bias. But this is something that I hope that if it is, that we have long and significant communications about this. Implicit bias. This is a topic that you're going to hear a lot of people discussing throughout this process, this plan, and in years to come. And essentially, it's a subconscious development that you have, and it starts at a very young age. Something that you favor or disfavor, it's a decision that's made within fractions of a second. Where it becomes an issue in a professional law enforcement agency is if you have an implicit bias and you act upon that bias inappropriately, if you discriminate against somebody based upon your biases, if you fail to provide a service to someone that should receive a service from our agency based upon your biases, that's a problem. Again, this is something that we are going to be doing a lot more work in and making sure that our members receive as much training as possible.
Can I just ask a question, Sheriff?
Yes.
I'm just curious, are there currently statistics that are kept based on numbers of responses based on racial backgrounds in terms of, and then comparisons with arrests made or prosecution pursued, those kinds of categories?
DCJS maintains a number of statistics. You don't have to have a specific sign-on or specialized access to get into those. DCJS is the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services. And much of what you just asked are things that they will track. Anything that would relate to prosecution, I would defer to our local district attorney or a public defender. You know, I just really quickly ran the last 5 years for our sheriff's office. And it's really very consistent. For the past 5 years, we've had 65% of our arrests were Hispanic or white males, 30% were Hispanic or white females, 4% were black males, 1% were black females. And in that, I look to go inside because every arrest is not the same. If we have a proactive arrest, an arrest where an officer is going out, seeking out or looking for a crime in progress and making an arrest, that would be viewed upon differently as responding to our factory outlet stores or making an arrest for someone who has contraband in our correctional facility. Certain arrests are within our control, certain arrests are outside our control. And if we had any concerns with a certain specific group, male, female, gender specific, racially specific, we would really want to focus on the ones that are proactive and within the officer's controls. But from what we've seen, and you know, again, I would defer to or seek out the guidance of the public defender or district attorney to see if they see anything that's disproportionate. I did not see anything during our comprehensive studies that was at all alarming. Did that answer your question, Ms. Gardner?
Yes, thanks.
Thank you. De-escalation training. this really is something that every officer, when they go through the basic course, they go through tremendous amount of de-escalation training during defensive tactics, use of physical force. And this is something that so many interactions that you see on the media, in the news, on YouTube, that have gone in an adverse direction could be possibly be prevented during the de-escalation phase. Making sure that our members are communicating professionally, that they are properly trained, that they understand our policies and procedures, what they can and cannot do. This is an area that during in-service training, whenever we review defensive tactics, use of force during our annual trainings, we spend a lot of time with our members going through scenarios and ensuring that people that call the Warren County Sheriff's Office, people that we respond to, we're responding during their times of crisis. And we should expect that they're not going to be calm, cool, and collected. If we respond and we are in turn not calm, cool, and collected, we're not doing anybody any good. So again, this is an area that we take it very seriously. We train a tremendous amount, and we want to continue and will continue to provide more training. If ever use of physical force incident that occurs in our Warren County Sheriff's Office is reported on a New York State incident report, and it's also reported on a specialized use of physical force report. Those reports are submitted to that member's first line supervisor for review, and then it's in turn submitted to our Sheriff's Administration for review. Our lieutenants also submit those forms to the New York State Division of Criminal Justice Services for their review and oversight. And you will note that there's going to be a new group that's established through our Attorney General who will be conducting their own independent review under certain circumstances of use of physical force incidents. So again, this is something that we take very seriously. It's documented very well. If we get a sense that any incident where there's a use of force was unreasonable, unnecessary, excessive in any way, shape, or form, it's immediately addressed. Anybody, any questions relating to de-escalation? Okay. I'm hoping that the quietness is just because I'm doing such a great job explaining all of this. Lead, law enforcement assisted diversion programs. Diversion is something that already occurs in Warren County, and for the most part, it's occurring, actually, in whole, it's occurring after arrest. What these programs are proposing, and I just met with Chief Lydon, whose last day is this Friday, they're looking into implementing this type of a program in the city of Glens Falls. And this would be a program that we would definitely take a look at. Essentially, what would happen is low-level offenses. You have an offender that committed a larceny, low-level crime. Rather than introduce them into the court systems, they would be diverted into a program. And when you read about it and you hear some of the studies, law enforcement is an integral component in that decision-making as to whether or not they're diverted. I would have concerns, especially in this day and age. Trust is of the utmost importance with our community. If our community is not trusting of us, they don't believe that we're doing a good job and providing a great service, we're not going to be successful. And right now, I know there are people out there that just don't trust us. It's not us as people, it's us as a profession. And if we enter into a program such as this, where the police officers are having a say as to who's diverted and who's not diverted, I would enter into that with an abundance of caution, because I would never want somebody pointing a finger saying that you chose this person to be diverted and this person not to be diverted, and why. If we started a program like this in Warren County, I think it would be necessary to have social worker, a caseworker, somebody to manage the offenders, maybe to have law enforcement to be part of the process and making the determination and providing feedback on the incident and the arrest. I absolutely would want to make sure that our victims are heard. We're going to spend a lot of time over the next weeks and months talking about offenders and offender rights. And throughout this entire process, we cannot lose sight of our victims and making sure that we're still looking out for them. So they, if we were to do something like this, they definitely need to have a voice and be heard.
Sheriff, a follow-up on diversion program, Restorative Practices. You're right, the city of Glens Falls has talked about a lead program, but I mean, obviously, the average city in the county where you have 930 square miles is different. And I think your point about choosing who gets into the diversion program by a sheriff's office is a good point. But I think another thing with different models in the country have to do with partnering with community agencies that do conflict resolution, having ABA trained deputies as part of an individual who will be involved in the process, circle, most kinds of things. So I think those are great worthwhile programs.
And again, we would be all for it. You know, you introduce it in a way like that with a model such as that, I think it would have tremendous success. And essentially, that's why we're all here today as stakeholders, to get everyone with your areas of expertise. And that is something that I absolutely think we need to include on this plan. Something that we're going to take slowly, but we'll take a look at, and we'll do it through anyone who wishes to be involved.
I think that as long as there's evidence-based practice behind some of that, then those programs, especially when considering alcohol and drug, are very successful. But when you do a wide range of different criminal offenses and put that in the hands of the police officers, I definitely think it becomes a level of concern.
Yes, thank you. Any other points? Okay. Restorative justice. This is something that's not new to law enforcement, not new to police service. It's something that I think is kind of new to our area. And essentially what it is, it's a rehabilitative approach where you take an offender and a victim and you have them meet together in a room and they share their experiences, how the victim felt, what they experienced throughout the process of the offense, and where the offender was at. And through that, you hope to restore hope for the victim, rehabilitate the offender, and potentially come to a resolve again with the hope of keeping people out of a correctional facility, keeping people out of the court systems. I know that there are mediation services that are already out there. If this is something, I think it's something worth taking a look at. But again, if this is something that we're going to do, focusing on police, law enforcement, and our interaction with these people, again, we are with them during their time of crisis. So I could not see us coming back to our police station and sitting down in a meeting room during that time as law enforcement and trying to have a productive communication between victim and offender. With that said, I think that it could be something that would have success, but it would have to be something that it would be postponed and arranged and agreed upon by all parties. Is anybody familiar with this practice? Anybody have any experience or anything to offer? Yes.
Yeah, I'm familiar with restorative justice work that I did in Washington, D.C. with the Metropolitan Police Department there, and implemented it more in the school setting. And but I do know there are many police departments that would use restorative justice practices, and as well as 72 countries around the world. And I've personally seen it effective, but it certainly is not good for every scenario. For example, a victim of rape, right? You wouldn't want to put the victim and the offender in the same room for restorative justice or restorative circle. But for other offenses, and it's definitely case by case, and with the experts, they would determine whether it would be helpful to the victim and the offender or not. But just like, Todd's point about making sure that there's evidence, to support which offenses it would be helpful for and which ones it may not. But there are people in our community with experience in restorative justice, and I know they use it in the probation department, and have seen great success with the young people in those restorative circle programs.
Was that when you see these programs, was it pre-arrest?
Yes.
Post-arrest?
Both. I worked with it more with pre-arrest, right, to avoid arresting juveniles. So let's say there's a conflict between teenagers, right, and it may have even gotten physical, but to avoid arrest, being with trained professionals for conflict resolution and the restorative process.
Would you have any materials or anything that you could share with us?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Many.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, Sheriff. Many of the school districts in the Washington, Saratoga, Warren Health Associates employ restorative practices as part of their overall code of conduct for students. What we learn is so many of the students aren't really reflective about their actions. And so this isn't for every type of offense, but for a great deal of offenses. Students don't often understand the impact on others, so we try to use that. Of course, we're an educational system, so the goal is to always educate children, not only about the academics, but also about their actions. And so we do use restorative practices in many of our programs, and it's part of our code of conduct for several years. We've been doing this.
And you've seen success?
Yeah, it has to be done for the right purposes, the right reasons. You have to have buy-in, you have to have the student and the adults have to be willing to participate. It doesn't always work, but it generally has been pretty effective. And it's sometimes more effective than just, we're going to assign a kid to a detention or something where they don't really have reflection about their accountability. And so in many cases, it's very, very effective. But not for every situation.
Dealing with juveniles, I'm confident that Mr. Yusi and his staff would be involved. Is this something that you got experience with?
It is, Sheriff. As I tell people, we dipped our toes in it, we're probably up to our ankles in it now, but we're something we want to continue to go further. And we see the success in dealing as Mr. Dexter indicated, with many of our school districts who are interested in being great partners. And, we've done a lot of work in Glens Falls, and it's been successful. We've been hampered by the pandemic, as everybody obviously. But as Liza also indicated, it's not for every crime, and there's a lot of preparatory work to get there, not only evaluating the cases with training, but that's the focus we want to shift for as we get into the juvenile justice system all the way. So we're very pleased with it. The little bit we've done, we're not experts, but we continue to try to educate ourselves and move on. So it's been fabulous thing we've been involved.
Excellent. I'm getting a sense that as we move forward, we may need to have some little subcommittees or meetings without the entire group so we can collaborate, put some thoughts down on paper, and then bring that back to the entire group, share it, and crunch that information. Thank you. Any more points on restorative justice? I feel like we're leaving out the people who are on Zoom. Okay. Community-based outreach and conflict resolution. Community-based outreach is far more than just having programs and, having a specific date where you meet with the community. For us, Sheriff's Office is a unique agency. The city of Glens Falls, they have their police officers, they patrol the city of Glens Falls. The Sheriff's Office has patrol officers that work out of 3 different stations, and they patrol the entire county. And every township is unique. Their needs are unique. Their expectations of us are very different. So what we started to do in January to better engage the community outreach, was to very purposefully assign our police officers to specific areas as much as possible. So if you have officers who live and prefer to work in Queensbury, they're working in Queensbury as much as possible. Lake George Luzerne, the northern townships. There are 2 schools of thought with that. If you have an officer who's always working in Queensbury and they need to work a shift in Chestertown, the northern townships, they're not going to be familiar. And you're right, they're going to be less familiar. But we would rather have officers who are deeply engaged and connected with the communities that they work in than familiar with all. And we're finding already since January tremendous success. The feedback from the community has been nothing but positive. Our community outreach has skyrocketed. The feedback that the undersheriff and I receive, phone calls, it's been spectacular. We expect if an officer is driving through a neighborhood that they stop if they see somebody out by their mailbox and they say hello, you know, they engage in a conversation. If we develop a trust and a rapport, a connection, community outreach with the community we serve, again, we're going to be extremely far more successful. People are going to have a comfort level with us. And through those conversations, hey, Jim, I wouldn't have bothered you, but you stopped. I want to let you know that somebody broke into my car last night and I didn't want to report it. It's through those things that we better connect and better serve our communities. Beyond that, speaking about community engagement, we have school resource officers in most every one of our school districts within the county. We do school checks, meaning that the officers who are assigned to certain areas stop throughout the day and they'll walk through the schools, check to make sure everything's safe and well. We do have programs such as Project Lifesaver, Operation Safe Child, the Yellow Dot program, Coffee with a Cop. Anything, I'm going to say this publicly to anybody listening and to all of you to share. If there's any community organization out there that wants to collaborate with the Warren County Sheriff's Office, wants to partner with us, wants to better engage or see an opportunity for us to better engage, our answer is always going to be yes. We find a way, we're going to do it. That's the community-based outreach. It combines 2 points, conflict resolution, which the two are similar but really don't go hand in hand. For us, conflict resolution is something that we do each and every day. It goes back to interpersonal skills, communication skills, responding to these people during times of crisis, de-escalating a situation, something that we're going to continue to work on through training. And again, we also provide information and collaboration with services such as Mediation Matters to allow them to assist in conflict resolution. That's kind of a really high-level overview. Does anybody have any points, anything they'd like to share, to offer? Yes.
When you're talking about the community-based outreach programs, you listed a series of ones that the Sheriff's Department participates in. I don't think everybody knows what each of those programs are. You don't have to detail it here, but maybe you could do like an email out saying what they are, because I didn't know all of them.
Absolutely. I'd love to. Anybody, anything else? Okay. Problem-oriented policing, that's very clear. That's essentially proactively approaching and preventing an incident from occurring by addressing the problem. And really a simple example is if we have an establishment, a bar, if you will, that is a constant source of police activity. We're continually being called to that business, addressing the problem, what's going on to cause these calls for service before we receive the calls for service. Is it something that is environmental with the business? Is it something that's going on with the management, with the owner, with the patrons? Doing what we can through evidence-based policing to address the problem before we have incidents. That's something that we do very well, and that's something that, there's really not a lot that I have to share, but again, I'm going to say, as we go through this plan, if anybody has any suggestions, points that you want to discuss. Okay. Hotspots policing is exactly as it sounds. Again, through evidence-based policing, studies have shown if you have a high crime or an area of intense activity for law enforcement, having an officer during that, the golden time in law enforcement is not the time that's spent when an officer is responding to the call. It's what they're doing in between their calls, where they're going, how they're utilizing their time. Hotspots policing states that if you spend 15 minutes in an area that's high crime or a high number of calls, that 15 minutes will equate to 2 hours worth of a reduction in crime or calls in that location. So we realize our resources are limited, but through hotspots policing, spending 5, 10, 15 minutes in that location, being seen, being visible, doing it not predictably, really serves to benefit for several hours. For us, I think another good example is I was really surprised when I became sheriff that the calls that I received that are negative, the complaints, I anticipated they'd be really high-level crimes, significant issues. And when I say this, they are significant issues because I experience it myself. But the call that we received the most, speeding vehicles through a neighborhood, somebody not stopping at a stop sign. We realize that we can't have an officer in a neighborhood on a street for an entire shift, but going into that neighborhood, spending 15 minutes at a time on that shift, it's going to slow down that traffic 2 to 3 hours thereafter. So that's a good local example of hotspots policing. Anybody have any points?
Sheriff, do we have data about the socioeconomic factors involved in those hotspots? Like, does hotspot policing happen more in low-income areas, for example?
I don't have that data. And for us, when we were looking at our plan and our comprehensive studies, we were really trying to focus on Warren County. And I wouldn't even want to step into that hole and try to venture a guess. If you like, we can try to dig out some of that information.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sheriff, what's the frequency of evaluating data and determining resources available?
For us, I guess you could say we're a larger organization in comparison to some, but we're really a small, tight-knit family. And 4 out of the 5 members of our police administration are sitting in this room today. We work in an office where all the doors are open. It's a really warm environment. We are reviewing our operations each and every day. Calls come in, every member looks at the calls for service from the night before, the weekend before. We're constantly having conversations about what we're doing, where we can improve. Our deployment really has not changed for as long as I've been here, and I've been in the sheriff's office for 28 years. But when I say that, it hasn't changed overall, but it changes throughout the year. Obviously, during times of high tourism, we deploy more resources into Lake George and the village and the tourist areas. But that's something that we don't have planned meetings. We're not pulling out statistics and reviewing it. We are so plugged into what's occurring in our agency that we do it all the time. When I say that, I hope that I don't come off as saying, we know what we're doing, we can't do any better. If you have a suggestion or an area that you think we can improve or something, when you bring up that point that you suggest we look at, please share that. Anything more about hotspots policing? Okay, next point, focused deterrence. Essentially, in a nutshell, law enforcement would focus its energy, for instance, in an urban environment, in a high crime, drug, gang-related area. They would reach out, actually contact and communicate with gang members, offenders, and let them know that we are watching you. We're going to put as much resources at your crimes, at your offenses, at your activity as possible. And if we learn that you commit an offense, we are going to do everything to prosecute you to the full extent of the law, focusing on that group or that area. On the other side, the deterrence, trying to engage community groups, elders in your community, at the same time to reach out and say, hey, we understand that law enforcement they're observing you, they're watching you, they're suspicious that there may be criminal activity. If this is the case, what can we do to help you? How can we pull you from that? What can we do to deter you from these types of actions? We talked about this, and we can only think of one instance in our sheriff's office over decades that we've actually done this. We did find success, but this isn't something that we do on a regular basis. I would, especially in the climate that we're in, the law enforcement relationship, again, throughout the country, it's fragile. I would have strong reluctance in reaching out to somebody and accusing them of being an offender before they offend and letting them know that we are focused on them. And I really was not able to get much in the way of data as far as studies go. And I would ask if anybody has any experience or knowledge, anything they'd like to share relating to focused deterrence, please. Okay. Crime prevention through environmental design. This is an area where I think we have a tremendous opportunity to connect with our community. CDEP is CDTFP, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. There's a training program that's offered to law enforcement. We can send members to receive this training, and not to say they become experts, but they learn things to watch for with the environment. A business, a residence, a neighborhood can be safer just by some environmental changes, adding lighting, surveillance cameras, cutting down shrubs that might be a little high, teaching people to keep their lights on inside at night within a business. What we plan on doing is having a few of our members receive this training, coming up with a program and opening it up to our county and offering to businesses this as a free service. If you've been victimized, if you have concerns that your business is vulnerable, call us. We'd like to come down and we'll do an assessment. We'll assist you. I don't know, and maybe Mr. Biddle would have more information on this, but this is an area where we're familiar with it. We have a general understanding, but I think we can really do well.
Sheriff, this would be most welcome for the business community, and considering that 80% of our businesses in Warren County, our total number of employees are 20 people or less, there's a number of small businesses that this would be beyond their scope as far as financial acumen and intelligence on the subject. So anything that you could partner with the business community, I wholeheartedly support and actually want to be very active in making that a reality in our county.
Outstanding. Well, please know this is coming.
Great, thank you.
Anybody, anything else? If there are comments, Mr. Lehman, could you please share those with us?
Yes, Sheriff. Let me start here with a Karen Serro asked about whether criminal offenders can be offered diversion options. I don't know if you want to take these, answer them, and then I'll move to the next one.
Yes, criminal offenders can be offered diversion options. We spoke specifically about law enforcement assisted diversion. That's something that we're going to look into. It's a component of our plan, something that we will address. And there are actually diversion programs that are currently in place, but they're post-arrest.
Okay. Karen Serro also asked if a program could be established where citizens in good standing could be trained as auxiliary peace officers under the direction and supervision of each county's respective sheriff.
That's not the first time I've received that question. That's something that we've started to have conversations about. And I know that that would require a lot more than our sheriff to be involved in. But it's something we will continue to talk about. If it's something that the sheriff's office chooses to venture into, we will absolutely seek out community input. We'll get it out to the media and look for volunteers.
Okay, we also have a couple who emailed who weren't able to use the chat function. We have one person who asked not to have her name revealed online, but we'll pass it on to you privately, who said, "Thank you for listening to the comments of community members. I think that together we can come up with some wonderful ideas to help our system work better and more efficiently for the greater good. I sincerely appreciate your time. I feel very strongly about the topic I am going to comment about, and I care about it passionately. I have family and also book knowledge of how this can affect individuals from many perspectives and where the opportunities lie in helping things get better. I would like to advocate for proactive drug and alcohol treatment. I believe that there is opportunity to offer to help many and reduce repetitive crimes by mandating treatment and offering treatment as part of sentencing. There has been growth in this area with the development of drug court. Our local drug courts and their employees are doing a tremendous job. I think that the more we can develop and expand upon these methods, the better it will be for our citizens, crime rate, and community as a whole. I believe that inpatient treatment needs to be considered in sentencing as well. I believe that this could be used in replacement of or in addition to jail time. In addition, mental health counseling should be included. Both mental health counseling and treatment should also be part of services offered while in jail. I believe that we need to focus on reformative justice. If we want those who have served jail time to be reformed citizens, then I believe we need to offer the services that help achieve this goal. I have other ideas to share on this topic, but want to keep my comments as brief as possible here in respect of others' time. I also think that we need to advocate for police officers to have individuals to call and arrive on the scene to assist in time of arrests, calls, and other involvement where addiction is possible. It is not expected that police officers can be experts in this field, but it is often an opportunity to help the individual or family with seeking help in the moment law enforcement becomes aware of an issue. The same is true when an individual lands in the emergency room. A liaison is often needed in times of crisis, both for the individual and the family. It is very difficult to get someone into treatment, and it needs to be easier. I believe the criminal justice system can help. I think that anytime we can begin to focus on reform instead of or in combination with punishment, we will be making strides toward helping the citizens and community as a whole. That was that person's comment. From Supervisor Ben Driscoll, who asked Sheriff LaFar, could you continue to briefly elaborate as to how the Warren County Sheriff's Department will collaborate with the Glens Falls Police Department, the New York State Police, and other regional law enforcement agencies?
Certainly. Well, I'll break that up into two sections. When it comes to this executive order and this plan, every municipality has to develop their own. We could share our framework. They could use some of that information. But again, the needs of Warren County and our sheriff's office are going to be very different than the needs of the city of Glens Falls. So I met with the chief yesterday. We are in collaboration. We're in discussions. We are sharing that information, but our plans have to be independent. When it talks about day-to-day operations, we work very well together. We share resources. Obviously, the New York State Police has far more reaching resources than we do. Anytime we have a major event, a major crime, we know they are only a phone call away, and they know we are the same. So in Warren County, we are one family, and we work very well together. Yes.
Sheriff, what opportunity is there to collaborate with sheriff's departments in neighboring counties for best practices and so on as they're going through the same thing? That is something, again, especially throughout this first year, kind of the new kid on the block in our region as it goes for sheriffs. And our sheriff's offices around Warren County, they've kind of welcomed me in as the new kid and taken me under their wing. And the New York State Sheriff's Association, each one of these sheriffs, they're only a phone call away. And we are collaborating on a daily basis. We have meetings, we'll gather for lunch, we'll gather for dinner. We have weekly phone calls to the New York State Sheriff's Association. Any point that's a hot topic currently, it's discussed during these conversations, whether it's COVID, Executive Order 203, any number of points. And the issues that we face, they're the same issues that are faced on the other side of the county line and throughout our state. So reaching out to somebody who has 12 years experience serving as a sheriff that can say to you, yeah, I remember when that happened and this is how we handled it, it's invaluable. And we are doing that now. And though they may not admit it, some are actually reaching out for a little information from me. So, but it works very well. Thank you. Thank you.
Sheriff, may I comment on the alcohol and drug aspect of that question?
Yes.
So one of the things I want to say, I think Warren County does a very good job at creating programs. As I've worked with some of these people on this group, I've talked to Bob Yuski on several occasions. I'm involved in the drug courts, also involved in some mental health. I think one of the biggest things we need to keep creating is the mental health. And I know Rob York, you do a great job of trying to create more of that. I think that's a big need in our community. I think our jail is turning to the better as far as getting people the help that they need while they're in jail, while that brief period of time, hopefully, that they're in there, that setting up some kind of follow-up services post-jail to be able to get the treatment that they need. I also know that jail has looked at some Vivitrol, which is your blocker when it comes to opiates, as opiates is one of our biggest problems in the area. So I think we can continue to do better with that. I think our drug court, being able to give people opportunity to opt out of state prison, as Jason gives a lot of people the opportunity to do that, and it's up to them to be able to take those opportunities. So I think Warren County does a great job of being able to do that. I think we can do a little bit better in bridging that from jail.
I agree. Thank you very much.
So how about the?
Oh, go ahead, Mary.
I was going to ask about the mental health aspect. With the Warren County, I know you must be linked up with different mental health groups.
Yes.
Okay, so when you do have a mental health case, do you seek out the other organizations first before jail, when possible?
For us, we don't have the ability or discretion. If there's an offense that's occurred in our presence and somebody is wishing to have a person arrested, we have an obligation to make that arrest, and we do. Those programs, we offer the services, we collaborate with these organizations, and there are instances where if someone is not going to be arrested, it's clear to us they are experiencing symptoms or signs of mental illness, and they are a threat or a harm to themselves or others, we would make sure that they are taken to the hospital and seen and treated. Persons who are arrested, as soon as they reach our correctional facility, we have staff on hand 24 hours a day, social workers, caseworkers, and they are provided that service from the time they come in. Obviously, that's going to be a much more stressful environment. So we're not abandoning them when they come in. But for us to make a determination, we're not trained to make a determination about mental health or diagnose. We are unfortunately obligated to make an arrest and then hope that the organizations can act and make the referrals and provide the assistance.
So you get in touch with the organizations though?
Yes, we
or
do.
If they would have to. Okay, thank you.
Sheriff, I wanted to add something to that. As we know, the criminal justice reform started in January, and now I would say, I don't want to give percentages, but the absolute vast majority of all cases are not bail eligible. So these people generally, unless they're committing a qualifying offense, which would be a homicide, a violent felony offense, or certain other qualifying offenses, they're not going to jail. So there's not going to, I would assume your jail population of people pending charges is dramatically lower than it was a year ago, for example.
Yes, it is.
So I'm not sure how intervention would take place, because in many cases, you're mandated to do an appearance ticket, depending on the circumstances. I do know, and I think Marcy's in the room, the public defender's office oftentimes will raise those issues. They get to meet the clients, they get to talk to them. As we all know, their clients have the right to remain silent. They don't have to speak to your agency at all. And so I think Marcy's group does a good job of trying to pick out those issues and then also make referrals. And I should say there was some talk about drug and alcohol abuse. I would say, just from my experience on the prosecution side, working with probation, working with all the agencies, that is something that's screened constantly. And there are efforts in every single case where it's appropriate to get people into treatment of all kinds. And that includes mental health treatment as well. Bob Busey's probation department does pre-plea investigations, pre-sentence investigations. They make recommendations. There's a lot of things going on currently and that have been going on for years and years to try to get people the services they need. There's obviously, and I'll cut myself short here, but there's a sliding scale of crime. I prosecuted a case recently in the last couple of years where someone murdered 2 people. He may have a drug problem, but that case is obviously not going to be treated like someone who maybe keeps stealing and they have a drug problem. So there are a lot of factors that are at play when you're making decisions on how to handle a case. But people in custody, no matter the crime, should have some resources available to them. And I know that's something maybe more possible now that the jail numbers are so much lower.
Yes, thank you. And Mary, I was going to ask, and if Marcy would speak, much of these interactions and referrals are likely through interactions with you. Would that be correct, Marcy?
Yes, it is. We have a case manager now, so he assists our clients with providing services or hooking them up and giving them information about different services for them to utilize. So it has become much more proactive for our office since we've had that position in our office.
Thank you. Did you hear that, Mary? Okay, perfect.
Is that one?
Sheriff,
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, because I have personally reached out to even to help clients find resources like food.
Yes.
Yeah. So
My apologies, Mr. York. I left out our area expert, please.
No, I just wanted to make a comment that in regard to those bridging services like that Todd was talking about and trying to meet some of those needs related to mental health and substance abuse. A couple of programs that I'm glad to hear that we're going to be talking about LEAD and at least exploring that. But also Essex County is doing a program that's called the Law Enforcement Mental Health Referral System. They call it LEMERS. And it's an online system where the officer can submit a referral to the mental health and substance abuse system. So I'm hoping, we don't have to get into it now, the details. I just hope that at some point we can be discussing that as well. And Broome County is doing a program where they, at the 911 level, they divert some mental health crises directly to a mobile crisis team. And we do have a mobile crisis team here. It's not fully 24/7 at this point, although the plan is to do that. But at the 911 level in Broome County, they divert some of the mental health crises to their mobile crisis team. So if that's something we could also explore here.
Absolutely. I think we need to.
I was on a similar committee to that when I lived in the state of New Hampshire. I worked in community mental health, and we had a partnership with the police. And when we would have like a client escalating maybe in public and causing a scene or maybe threatening to harm themselves, we would also go with the police to interact with the client. So the police would be there in case the situation became violent, but we would do the therapeutic interventions to de-escalate the client to basically find out if they needed to go to the hospital or if they could go home.
What organization were you with?
I was working with Genesis Behavioral Health in Laconia, New Hampshire. It was a great program. And Dartmouth did most of our training, and they did it all for free. So.
I mean, that's great. If we could, it's Rob and Todd and everybody talked about substance abuse and mental health big problems. And the police are asked to do everything. There's a call for everything, I can imagine. And you're not experts on everything, nor should you be. And the ability to once you stabilize the situation and turn it over to a mental health provider, substance abuse provider, a referral, or somebody talked about mobile responses would be, great to build up that infrastructure. I think would be a great service to the community. And what you talked about is fantastic.
I feel like people.
Getting that here would be,
Yeah.
one of the bigger things.
Absolutely. All of these services, the things that we're mentioning, having discussions about addiction, mental health, they're vital, and they're services that are absolutely necessary. Like Mr. Yusi said, typically after 4 p.m., 5 p.m. definitely, if something happens in Warren County and somebody needs help, they call 911. And the person responding is a police officer. And it doesn't matter if it's a bat in their attic, their basement's flooded, the furnace stopped working. They have no one else to call, so they call us. And you're right, we're not equipped to handle that. So through this plan, if we could come up with more services that we can offer to our community for mental health, for addiction, if we could come up with a program where we have a referral system that's electronic that can submit to you, our members can submit them electronically, I think that this plan would be successful. I hope that we continue to have these discussions. And I know for me, they're going to go far beyond just discussions. They're going to be things that will push. If they can work in Essex County, they can definitely be working in Warren County. Yes.
Sheriff, just in that, following that theme, I'm wondering whether the state police, with their review and reform of their policies, if they're on the same schedule as us, and if there might be anything that they're looking at that we could maybe take advantage of as well.
I'm not sure what the state police's requirements are, and definitely not sure what their schedule is. In speaking with some members locally, they're not part of any meetings or interactions or discussions. That's something that I'm going to follow up with the Sheriff's Association. Do you have more detail or more information?
No, I just don't know.
Okay. I've not, to be honest with you, I've not heard one conversation or interaction relating to the New York State Police and their plans for this process. Going to continue through. The next point is violence prevention reduction interventions. And again, this is something that it's important. Family violence, domestic violence, school violence. We have programs that are in place. Domestic Violence Project. We have programs in the schools. Advocates trying to connect and engage with groups like the YMCA for our children, youth groups. This is something where we realize that we would just want to make sure that we are an arm of these services, that we assist them, that we put people in touch with these programs, crime victims advocates, probation, any group out there that has certain topics that you want to address or discuss or share, please, we're open. Bob, do you have anything? Violence prevention, okay. Ms. Gardner, Domestic Violence Project, do you want to speak to that at all in your prevention of violence?
Just to say that we certainly are a program that provides services to victims of domestic violence and their family members. Less so on this side of prevention in terms of in response once that violence has occurred. That level of primary prevention is certainly something that we do in terms of providing outreach. Okay.
With your experience, do you see areas where our sheriff's office, our county could improve?
I think, ongoing communication with victims around their experience of the criminal justice system, I'm sure could enlighten the conversation.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sheriff, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I just, now that we're on violence and prevention, I was wondering the percentage of minority officers that you have.
The Warren County Sheriff's Office does not have any minority officers in the police force.
None.
That is an area, it's not something that's required in this plan. It's not a point by the governor, but it's something that's on my list and we were going to definitely talk about. So in Warren County, we're bound by New York State civil service law. For us to hire somebody to become a police officer, they're required to apply, to take an examination, take the test, score high enough for them to be eligible for hire, and then commence with the process. Okay. To be perfectly honest with you, that's an area where we realize we need to be doing better. And I hope that you'll be an integral part in assisting us in doing better. And what our initial thought is, these examination postings right now, they go up on the internet, they're put out by the Civil Service Department here at the county. It would be very easy for us to share these examination notices with you, with other organizations throughout our community. We are struggling right now to recruit good people. So if that would be something you would be willing to collaborate with us on, we're absolutely willing to do.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. On that point, anything else? Okay, I understand there's some more public comments. We can take that.
Yes, Sheriff, we do have from a Paul Hancock. Hold on just a sec. Let me find that in my email. He asks, the Warren County Sheriff's Department received $728,000 in 1033 military equipment since the program began in 2014. That is very close to the amount received by the NYPD during the same period. Does the sheriff and the administration think that is appropriate for a department that serves 65,000 residents in a mostly rural county?
I'm not certain of the exact dollar amount. I'm going to have to take this gentleman's word for it. We have 2 of our emergency response team members in-house. The thing that I will say to that point is our emergency response team, some of our tactical equipment, it could be controversial with some people. And some people find it very offensive. They view us as being paramilitary and really too stern in our response. From an administrative perspective, I know, not that I feel, it's not my opinion, I know that equipment has been vital and it saves lives, it protects lives. We use it very cautiously. and we use it during emergency responses. It's something that if we have those resources available to our members, I think we would be doing a disservice to our county and our residents not to retain those and utilize those under emergency response situations, protecting lives from the public and protecting the lives of our members. They are really not offensive tools. They are reactive defensive tools for our sheriff's office. I hope that answers that well.
He did also ask kind of a follow-up question that you think you just did answer about whether the department would agree to forego any further use of this advanced military equipment and use of Edward Byrne Justice Assistance Grant Program funds to lower the enemy combatant approach to policing, and request that some or all of those funds be shifted to non-punitive, non-carceral programs.
Any of the resources that we have currently, we will retain.
Okay, another question from Mr. Hancock. Would the Warren County Sheriff's Office consider eliminating surveillance technology that disproportionately targets Black, Brown, and Muslim communities, such as facial recognition devices, drones, and predictive policing?
Our sheriff's office, and I'm not familiar with anyone in the county that utilizes any of that technology currently, so we wouldn't have to eliminate any of that.
For Mr. Hancock, another question. Would the department agree to allow properly trained 911 operators to divert calls involving individuals with mental illnesses or substance abuse issues to the appropriate health professionals? Would the department agree to divert funding from police and incarceration to these other non-punitive, non-carceral services? In other words, police would not be the first contact in these cases.
Mr. York brought up a point about the diversion at the 911 level, and that's absolutely something that we will be taking a look at. It will be a portion of our plan. As far as diversion of funding, that's something that's above my pay grade and outside my scope.
Another question from Mr. Hancock. Can the department comment on the wisdom of eliminating cash bail for low-level nonviolent offenders who are not a flight risk? For example, if someone shoplifts toilet paper, it's doubtful they would pose a danger to the public or a flight risk. If issuing more appearance tickets instead of jailing suspects reduces the need for incarceration, would the department recommend diverting funds from detention to rehabilitation and other non-punitive services?
I think I've got a handle on the question. That's something we would issue an appearance ticket for currently. And as far as the diversion of funds, again, that's something that's outside my control or our control as a law enforcement agency.
And last question from Mr. Hancock. What specific training do Warren County Sheriff's Office officers undergo to distinguish hate crimes from nonviolent, low-level property or verbal altercation crimes? Which of the two should take precedence?
Hate crimes is it's a portion of the curriculum training that every law enforcement member has to receive. Our sheriff's office has a policy that relates to hate crimes. I'd be more than happy to share that with Mr. Hancock. And our hate crimes are reported to New York State, so we would have statistics on any hate crimes in our jurisdiction.
We do also have a follow-up question it's posted under Karen Serro, but the person under that account clarified it is actually Anthony Serro. He asks, violence prevention in these situations, seconds matter, but all too often it can take minutes for LEOs to arrive. Once again, a citizen first responder corps of peacekeepers would be great help in getting to the scene more quickly and help the de-escalation process underway until the deputies arrive to take control. Then we have a response to that question from a Jim Coughlin. That's not actually a question, I guess it's a statement. Jim Coughlin, getting to the scene more quickly, how fast do you expect LEO to respond? I know firsthand our local LEO respond in a timely manner and do an excellent job. So that is all the comments we have right now.
Before I speak to that, Ms. Flores, you had your hand up. I don't know. Yes.
One of the questions talked about burn grants. And obviously, your agency cannot say, well, I'll take the money from burn grant and use it for something else. The burn grant all grants are for specific things. So I understand, yes, it would be nice to divert funding, but funding under grant funding has to follow the grant rules.
Yes. The sheriff's office is in the business of public safety. And when you talk about having an auxiliary, an ancillary police force, somebody to supplement what we're doing, our officers receive an extensive amount of training to protect the public, and we hold our members accountable to effectively police our community, to try to engage or put together some type of an organization of civilians to respond in the manner that was just suggested would be extremely challenging. I think there would be tremendous liability for the sheriff's office and the county. For them to try to respond to a call quicker than us, I mean, I visualize it as being very detrimental. Again, it's something that we're going to be open to any communications, any conversations that people would wish to have. We'll have those conversations and we will talk about this. But that is one that I have really strong reluctance towards jumping into. And if we did, it would go very slowly. Anyone, anything else? Really only one more point. The Municipal Police Training Council model policies. I touched on this earlier. Essentially, the Municipal Police Training Council is, again, a group of experienced law enforcement officials and leaders who review police service, review calls for service, review operations, and they develop model policies through evidence-based policing. Policies that are most effective and cause the least amount of harm. And again, for us to be an accredited agency, if there's a model policy in New York State that exists, we have to adopt that as our framework and incorporate all of the points for those model policies. The biggest one that's a talking point right now is the use of physical force. Again, our use of physical force follows that framework, but there are others such as domestic disputes, responding to domestic disputes, hate crimes, body-worn cameras, custodial interrogations, conducted electrical weapons, tasers, nasal naloxone, human trafficking, just to name a few. And the reason that certain points like this become model policies is studies have shown that we were lacking in certain areas. Responding to a domestic incident where someone had been a victim and maybe not making an arrest, and subsequent to that, the victim being re-victimized. So through that, there are best practices that have already been established, and this organization is constantly reviewing those practices, putting out their model policies, and there in turn, we will review and revise our own. Those policies, if you look them up, they're online. Again, you don't need to have a special sign-on or access. You can just go on to the internet and search them. They're all there for you. And I have them all on PDF. If it makes it easier, I could just, if any of you want them, send me an email and I'll shoot them out to you. Any questions about the policies? Okay. We touched on accreditation. That's the last point in the plan. Just one other point that has, this goes back to some of the conversations with the other sheriffs. Really a point that we're seeing a tremendous amount of response from our community relates to officer-involved shootings. And there's technology that's out there that can assist our officers in honing their skills. Technology that's it's virtual, but it's very lifelike, it's very realistic. And we are already starting to look at, through this plan, at researching the best technology that's out there, looking for grants to make this purchase. And we hope that probably not by April 1st, but within the next year or so, we're able to find this technology and make this purchase. If we do so, we would make sure that all of our members go through a training program with it, that they would do continuing education. And I think it would also be important to invite the community in, to have them experience what we're experiencing firsthand, to try to understand objective reasonableness from a law enforcement perspective. And that's something that we are definitely looking at, we're going to be purchasing. I'm hoping that some of you may have come with your own points or areas that you would like to adjust, things that you'd like to have our group start thinking about. This is for our stakeholders and anybody out who's out there who's listening. If you have them, please, now's the time to share. Yes.
I would like to address a point that Mary brought up on number 4, which talks about racial bias and racial justice in policing. You had indicated that DCJS, Department of Criminal Justice Services, has statistics about for Warren County. and you said that you had printed them out, anybody else can go online on it. I assume most of the stakeholders who are not in law enforcement would not be aware to get that. I'm wondering for the next meeting, could you just print us out the doctor or just send us an email about what the stats were? You read them all quickly, and I know that I couldn't write them all down that fast.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I will have ours in-house, and I will also, anything that I can locate from DCGS that I think the group would benefit from, rather than printing a lot, if it's okay with this group, I'll just PDFs and I'll email them to everybody. Okay.
The other thing I'd like to talk about that issue is, you would ask Mr. Harrison and my office to respond in terms of arrest by race. My office does not keep any documentation on race of any of our clients. I assume the DA's office doesn't keep those statistics either. And I know there was a question as to whether we could provide that to the group, and I can't. So and I don't think Jason can provide
it. I couldn't hear everything that Marcy that you were saying, but when you're talking about tracking statistics, obviously at the DA's office we get, and the public defender's office gets this as well. We get charging from all different agencies, so it's obviously not just the Warren County Sheriff's Office, New York State Police, and it's the Glens Falls Police Department. We don't have an internal tracking system by race of criminal prosecution. There may be something in that, if you deep dive in the DCJS data, there may be things that county by county that will look at those numbers, but that's not something that we keep internally or that we track internally.
So the DCJS figures are going to indicate figures for Warren County. Included in those will be arrests from the New York State Police and the City of Glens Falls, Bolton Police Department. So we looked at our own in-house records. And of course, on an arrest report, you have gender, race. So it was very easy for us to compile that data, but I'm still going to send out anything that I can locate that I think may be valuable to you. I'll share that with you. Certainly.
And if I can then address the issue of anything that we would like to raise or topics, one of the issues that I think would be important for the county to consider is body cam videos for the officers. I know it's expensive, but I think it deals with transparency and accountability if an officer is wearing a body cam so that you can see what happened. And I know that there's a huge expense. I also know that there's a huge expense for the car cams. And again, that would be something that would again deal with transparency and those issues. And again, they're cost issues. But to me, those are important issues if they could be reached.
Body cameras and in-car cameras, they're technologies that we have researched. You're correct, they are expensive. They're absolutely technology that we would like to have. And ultimately it comes down, like you said, to budgets and purchasing. Body cameras, I think would be, if we were to choose one or the other, would be the first purchase because most of your interactions are going to occur face-to-face. An in-car camera and a police car, our cars are turned over, come offline about every 3 to 4 years. And when they come offline, you likely would not remove that technology and put it into a newer car. So the body-worn cameras can be leased. That is something that is going to be incorporated in our plan as something we would like to take a look at for the future. And I think it would be safe to say, maybe not next year, but I think we will be seeing that come down from the state as a mandate for all law enforcement agencies.
I think you may be right in terms of a mandate, because if I'm reading through the paperwork properly, New York State Police officers have to have body cam video by April 1st. So I think there's a move towards that with all law enforcement. So I think maybe there'll be funding for that.
Yeah. Is that all?
That's all I'm going to do right now.
Okay. All right.
Sheriff, transparency is always, as Marcy said, is always a big issue. And that means a lot of things. What is readily available on the website? I think the last time I looked, I think you actually break calls down in terms of what the calls actually were at specific times and those kinds of things. So I'm curious of what else could be added that would benefit the community, whether it's stats on physical force, as you talked about arrest with via race and those kinds of things. Just, you know, everybody talks about transparency and it means a lot of things, but what would be able to be put out there that would be accessible so people could look if they had questions regarding it?
What I think we would do, first off, I will say that the Warren County Sheriff's Office, and it's my fault, webpage is horrible. It is an absolutely atrocious platform. It's a terrible page. it doesn't present well, and it doesn't provide much information. It's a platform that's been in existence for several years, and we wanted to build it from the ground up. And we have a member of the county who's assisting us with that. It's in the works, and it will be coming out. I don't know if it'll be by the end of this year, but it really is a beautiful platform. Undershare.
I'm hoping it'll be, at least the piece will be up. Well, it is November, so hopefully somewhere we have any ideas you have, we can put on, take off, our Narcan, a lot of contacts for outside agencies, for health, for addiction. We're going to have all that attached to our website. I'm hoping it's, I'm going to use the word, and I don't use it often, board. It should be a great website. Well, we can add whatever you like. If you see something, our person that's working on this promises you can put anything on there or take anything from it.
I'm going to ask all of us maybe to do a little bit of homework. Things that I might think are important as a sheriff probably aren't necessarily as important to you, and other things may be so. So think of the things that you might want to search for on a sheriff's office webpage. Let us know, and it will be there. That will be part of our plan, is to make sure that we develop, and I say this to the entire community, if there's something that you want to search from our sheriff's office, let us know, and we'll put it up there. In this day and age, we can have drop-down fields and bullets and make the website very user-friendly. And we have a lot of good things to promote. Yes.
Just as a housekeeping item, when you speak, if you could speak into your microphone so the folks online can hear you. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Yusi. That was a great point. Anyone, anything? Yes, Mr. Leggett.
Sheriff, as with criminal justice reform, that's going to change the shape of a lot of things. What do you foresee policing will be like in several years? If, it's more apparent tickets that are put out, things like that. Where will your time be spent, and how will that affect your policing?
I was going to leave this and close on it. It's a document that's in your packet. So policing evolves, absolutely. Technology evolves. The resources that we have available, our expectations are ever changing. But the principles of what we do have been in place for decades, for centuries. And Sir Robert Peel in 1829, I ask you to read through these. And boy, if they don't hit right to the core of everything that we're trying to accomplish, I don't know what does. Take them home with you, read them, and know that when we are developing this plan for our county, keep these principles in mind, because that should be what's driving us. The day-to-day, I think, Mr. Leggett, you're right. We'll be issuing a lot more appearance tickets, and with that, maybe receiving some more warrants where people are failing to appear. There are changes coming to the vehicle and traffic law, certain offenses where if an operator is not paying fines, that, there may not be ramifications or penalties for that failure. Whatever we are required to operate under, whatever guidance, whatever laws are out there, we're going to work within those boundaries and provide you with excellent service. Anybody?
Sure.
Yes.
I did get a follow-up email comment from a Stephen Guidry asking, what is the next step in this process?
My hope is that I'm going to have an inbox in our email address for reinvention that's filled, that we can take and crunch, that we're going to get feedback from this group of stakeholders. We're going to take all of that information. We're going to talk about it. I think it's a little premature to draft a plan, but we'll start having conversations about what that plan would look like, what we would want to include, and we'll start the process of engaging people to move forward in that direction to draft a plan. as we draft it, we want to continue to have the community involved and to view what we're doing. So we want to share that through the county so they can have continued input. And I'm going to say this again publicly. If there's a group out there that would like me to come to your community, to come to meet with your organization, I have a small, quick PowerPoint presentation. I would love to come out and not talk to you, but hear from you and listen to see what you think we should be doing and where we should be improving. So it's going to be a slow process. Obviously, we have to have something in place by the third Friday in March, but we'll get there.
Sheriff, I have one last question.
Yes.
Unfortunately, a lot of executive orders and mandates don't come with the funding or the resources required to actually implement these mandates. So I know that this executive order states that, that submitting a plan to the state will help the Division of Budget determine, which places receive funding. But will the plan determine how much funding we receive?
I don't believe so. I believe that message was sent as a means to compel an agency, a municipality, to formulate this plan. Again, I don't want to speak ill, but this could not come at a worst possible time. We are experiencing a pandemic. All of our resources are stretched so incredibly thin, as Sheriff's Office included. But again, I go right back to our opening remarks. We're not going to be compelled into action. We're not looking to comply with this order. And we're not doing it because we're concerned about a loss of funding. This was something that was raised. Somebody shined a spotlight on our organization, our county. I see this as an opportunity, and we're committed to learn from this, to grow, and to hopefully do better.
So do you see concerns or challenges with implementing, or let's say we need more funding for training or any other plans that this team comes up with? Will there be grant opportunities or we'll, I guess, cross that bridge when we get to it?
I think it's safe to say, and I might defer to our county administrator or chairman of the board of supervisors when I am not a budget expert. And when it comes to trends like that, I think that all of our funds are going to be extremely tight. If there are things in our plan that rely solely on funding, money, we're going to struggle. We'll do our best as an administration to work with the budget we have to provide the best service. If it takes us a few years, I wouldn't want anybody to lose patience with us and think that we're not moving forward and not doing our best. But Mr. Moore, could maybe you speak to that?
And I think the sheriff classified it well, described it well, I should say, is a better word. It's a difficult year budget-wise, no matter who you are. There are areas in the sheriff's budget going into next year where we've approved an increase, but perhaps not as large an increase as the department would have liked. Training as an example. I'm just going off memory here. I think the budget for training was something like 20,000, and the request was 50, and we settled on 40. So it may not be what the department would have wanted in a perfect world, but we tried to work with them in a year where funding is scarce to try to do something. If it proves to, I've already had a conversation with the sheriff and the undersheriff that as we get into the new year, if the budget proves to be hardship, particularly in these are areas where we're trying to do reforms, that we'll be able to address that next year during the year.
Just a quick sort of to put in perspective, if in our plan we state that body-worn cameras would be beneficial for our community, understand that that's likely not going to be anything that occurs in 2021 unless it's an unfunded mandate from the state. But something like technology for use of deadly force on the street, something that our members can hone their skill on, something that maybe we can purchase for tens of thousands of dollars, especially if we can do that with grant funding, we would do something like that immediately. So it's going to be, I think, a staggered, rollout. Sorry, Ms. Flores.
I just want to add one more thing about budgets that people may not be aware of. The Sheriff's Department has a jail division. And even as Mr. Carrasone indicated, the numbers in the jail have gone down. That doesn't mean your staffing can go down in the jail. There there are requirements that you have. So people may say, well, if there's less people in jail, the sheriff's department can take that money and use it for something else, and you can't. And I don't know how much that is known through the community in general in terms of those kinds of issues.
That's correct. And thank you. That's a good point. We actually have 3 separate budgets within our sheriff's office: law enforcement, police services, corrections, and communications. They're all large budgets. I know that the service we provide is very expensive. We don't hide that. And I think it's like 87% of our budget is personnel. It's the police officers, the correction officers, the communications officers. So please trust that we make the best absolute use of our taxpayer resources. We are doing everything we can not to increase the tax levy, and again, work with what we have. If we can find something for free, a training, a device, a technology, we're going to grab hold of it.
Sheriff, one of the things I would recommend is it's a free training, is some of your officers to be able to attend drug court graduation, and some of that they arrest people and they see the bad side, but also to see the good side and the completion of treatment, and to see what they're doing is good stuff, and to give some of these offenders hope that it can get better if they take advantage of some of the programs that would be offered to them. Because I know that the police officers don't really have a lot of communication after they've been arrested, but to give them hope starting right then and there.
Mr. Monahan, I think that's an excellent idea. Thank you.
Just so you know, the drug treatment graduation is on December 17th at 2 p.m. It's going to be pretty much virtual. Maybe some graduates with 1 or 2 family members, but I'm sure if you contact Warren County Court, they will be able to give you the link to participate if anybody wants to observe.
We will be observing. Thank you, Marcy.
Thanks.
So the drug court program, is that is like a mentorship type thing? Or do you have some sort of mentorship type programs?
There's mentorship type programs. The drug court program that I'm talking about is the felony drug court program. If not for this program, these clients and these participants would be in state prison. And as a result of participating in this program, it's a diversion program. During the program, there are 3 phases. At one point, there are people who serve as mentors, people who have graduated from the program or senior in the program can be mentors for people who are younger in the program, but all these people who are in the program have felony convictions.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
2 more quick points. There's a document in your packet. It doesn't have a title. It's a color document, square like this. It's an initiative that you may hear about, and it might be on your radar now, especially serving as stakeholders. 8 Can't Wait initiative. And there are 8 points in here relating to use of physical force that the initiative indicates that if a police agency complies with these 8 points, that use of physical force, violence, and injuries will be reduced. I think the number is by 72%. I put some bullet points. I won't go into reading them all, but the Warren County Sheriff's Office is complying with all 8 of those bullet points by procedure and practice. And one final talking point, also within your packet, the second document is a community discussion, reform, and reinvention of policing in Warren County. This is essentially, it's a questionnaire survey where we provide a little background on our Warren County Sheriff's Office and seek feedback. On the last page, there's a specific email address where people can email their comments, concerns, suggestions, findings to our office. I respond to each and every email that we receive, as well as our phone number. If any of you wish to contact me at the Sheriff's Office and have a conversation, Mr. Lehman, the person who reached in that didn't want to give their name, if they wish to call our Sheriff's Office, I will find the time to speak with everyone. If no one has anything else to offer, I sincerely thank you all for your time. Like I said, I know you're extremely busy. This is something that we're taking very seriously. Make sure that you do your homework. If you can share this document with others, talk to people, get as many people as you can involved. You are our stakeholders, but you're also ambassadors for this plan. Spread the word, bring back the feedback, and We will be sending out an email soon to schedule our next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff.
Thank you. Have a good day.